Yes, and I think probably one thing that we should talk about today as well is the misconceptions that happen when people use the heuristics of, oh, well, I must be middle class, because I kind of feel like with middle class, people just assume that they are so, as long as they're kind of well off. And what I mean by well off is, they kind of have a roof over their heads. They've got some disposable income. They're not really working from paycheck to paycheck. And yeah, like a very much an emphasis of the fact that, they can go out for a nice meal or that sort of thing. And the reason why I've got there the principles of communism, it might be what you were kind of referring to before, is that he Engels, who wrote this book, and it's actually the first draft of the Communist Manifesto that he ends up writing with Karl Marx, is he goes massively into the history of the working class and basically the transition from the artisan period of history for the worker to the transition to the proletariat, which was, which eventuated out of the Industrial Revolution. And for those of you who don't know, the proletariat is basically that working class, that basically the factory worker that came to prominence in the Industrial Revolution. And Engels talks in the history a massive part about in the artisan period. So these were the merchants, these were the craftsmen that worked with their tools, that the difference between the proletariat and the artisan was the artisan, hey, got a bunch of clay, got a piece of stone, and worked with their tools, worked on that piece of stone from start to finish. So while it took time, they had the skills necessary to kind of work with that piece of clay or piece of stone. And they basically, if you commission them to create that artwork or that sort of thing, that one person basically had to work on it and they had to be there from the start to the finish. Yes. But with the proletariat is, well, basically like a cog in the machine, because everything became far more efficient with this sort of capitalism. You could give little pieces of the job to the various workers, and you didn't need that sort of artisan way of doing things. You could basically give a piece of the work off to all of the workers in the factory, and they worked on those commodities really efficiently. And that was basically the difference between the previous period, which was the artisan period, to the proletariat. And he actually uses this kind of argument to reinforce of, well, that's the reason why you get this sort of antagonism with capitalism of, are you basically part of the proletariat where you're kind of working on your commodities in the factory, and or are you the capitalists who basically put in the capital in order to run that factory, but you're actually exploiting the worker? It's basically that conversation about the antagonism and basically class consciousness.